Think that I accidentally hit a button. Hello. Hit the wrong button. Good start. You know me. Always organised. Hi, how you going? Sorry about the lighting. It's a bit shit, but whatever. Moving on. Um, so I think it's important to, well, first of all, okay, let me just quickly say, I'm feeling like there's so many things that I want to talk about. Like there's a lot of stuff happening and it's a lot of IP and a lot of stuff is kind of moving and passing me by because we're going into an election like season in Australia. But I'm also seeing it sort of some of that US culture war stuff. It's going to have an impact sort of here. And a lot of these sort of these things where, you got to understand where, as much as it might be funny, things like the M&M's thing, a lot of this like COVID shit, boring, sick of it, whatever. Um, that discourse around that. But a lot of this sort of culture war stuff that appears frivolous. I think it's really important that people kind of understand the bigger picture of where I'm coming from in terms of the like electoral impact, the political impact, the policy impact, and sort of, just really giving people some kind of basic shit that I assume people know, which is, first mistake. You should never assume people know shit that you know. But also kind of understanding, well, first of all, where I'm coming from, so I don't sound fucking crazy, but also just but also I've noticed that a lot of stuff's passing me by. So there's a lot of things that I go, oh, it's such a great practical example of how it's very difficult to tell the difference between maybe, say, a paid influencer campaign and maybe a one that's more organic and something that's happened. Like, I think over time, people in the industry have perfected the advertising industry, right? And there is some history there as well, but I won't go into that too much. Some of that is like around how advertising shifted and changed as well in response to digital, and how, now you've got advertising agencies that are now claiming to be digital agencies. And that's why you might be a bit confused about sort of first of all, what I do, and what even a digital agency is. But I think it's, that's another day. But the biggest takeaway that you can have here is that there's a model and a set of tactics, right, that have been perfected, refined, worked on, that sort of, like I've said before, the thing that is used to sell the Kardashians. And, like you sit there and you go, okay, well, what the fuck? Kardashians aren't famous for nothing. And my point is, and I go, she made $1 billion being famous for nothing. And a sex tape. And you go, yeah, she's a billionaire with no product to speak of originally, and built this machine, an empire based on these sort of marketing principles, PR, how to use the news cycle to your advantage, how to, and then making products, and then, constantly just creating that scarcity. I could talk about the Kardashians for days and days and days and days in how they are a wonderful, perfect embodiment. And props to them. Fucking love Kris Jenner. I know people don't like Kris Jenner. I fucking do. Fuck her. It's like, brilliant. Wish I'd thought of it. Wish I had supermodel kids. Like, fucking whatever. Anyway, but I'm saying, like, I think this is the missing part. It's funny how I've come full circle, which is, used to spend so much of my day trying to explain how the internet works to business owners. And now, user research and user surveys, and now fucking full circle explaining how the internet works. It's like, oh shit. Except I get paid a lot more to do it for business. But anyway, but I think a lot of people, you just don't understand how this stuff works. But also, sort of what I've seen is that downwind impact where you think these things are separate. First of all, you think that, tech is separate from politics, separate from philosophy, separate from history. So, again, it's that siloing of siloing that stops people from seeing sort of the bigger picture and the broader picture and the bigger history. So for me, broader history. And so this is why when I'm kind of talking all over the place, it's why I don't make sense to a lot of people, and it's why I might appear a bit batshit, because what I do is I keep trying to get people to zoom out from, this sort of narrow focus. Like, what is this thing? What is this thing? Like, yes, I can provide some building blocks. Absolutely, right? I think building blocks, going back to basics, understanding the basics will give you a pretty good understanding of what things look like now. You just probably haven't made the connections yet in terms of like the history of the internet, how it was sort of co-opted, the vision that we had for the internet. So the thing that we were sold versus the thing that we were, received and now sort of subjected to, how business, corporate, the conversations that were happening over in sort of IT land and business, corporate, again, siloing without really getting a full sense of the big picture. Also, the privacy guys, the Linux nerds, the people that kind of, the guys with the PGP key in their emails and all those, sort of that extra, they were kind of written off as paranoid and kooks and, early on, because again, I can see how that worked, right? The demonization of, like internet nerds who had concerns and who are aggrieved or who felt like they're the thing they were promised. So this happened very early on. So the way that when you understand the internet, like historically, okay, and if you understand history, not as a narrative, okay, because history has narrative, but if you look at history as events, because events are something that happen and are document, again, you piece that stuff together, but it's easier to sell a narrative by cherry picking certain events or rewriting certain events and leaving bits out that are really important. Like the thing that leads us sort of here with politics, okay, with this disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy fucking stuff, right, is that you need to understand this sort of in-group, out-group, nerd, jock dynamic that happened very early on the internet, but also a lot of the big religious wars that happened over dumb shit, okay? And again, I'm not going to go too crazy into sort of detail here, because I actually want to talk more about the left, and because I'm going to start with the building blocks. What does it mean to be the left? What does it mean to be the right? What does centrist mean? What does center mean? Because I actually noticed it from the interview, I was actually quite gobsmacked, and it's, again, no reflection on Roderick. It was just, again, you don't know what you don't know. There's blind spots for everyone. I've got blind spots, okay, in certain areas. Everyone misses things. That's, first of all, by design. That's how siloing works. I mean, I'm unusual in that I jump disciplines and, multidisciplinary, and I fucking bore the pants off of everybody. I understand that, okay? And academics tend to get very bewildered by me because they're used to that sort of narrow focus, and there is one thing, one job, one sort of canon of literature and studies. There's a canon. So what happened with it's interesting to see what happened with the humanities just in general in terms of fracturing left wing, the sort of basis of left wing thought. And it's kind of interesting because when you read things like Wikipedia, yes, you see events, you see kind of what happened, but what you don't see is how it happened or the mechanisms or the structures. It's like, Jessica Taylor actually tweeted this about the SSRI thing, which is where they talk about how the SSRI thing was a myth and folk. It was like, well, hang on a minute. And she's like, well, no, folk implies that it came from organically through people and that it just happened somehow. Not that there were hundreds of peer-reviewed papers and a whole team of nurses, doctors, psychologists, all these people that spread that myth. It was a top-down thing. It was not an organic. So to turn around and this has parallels with like the social sciences in general, which is, like people go, oh, well, in the 70s, the hippie movement just shifted, or Occupy imploded because of infighting, or Um, I'm going to do a new stream on Monday on the anti-work subreddit and what happened there. That is a case study in just fucking how it works every fucking time. Brilliant. It's also fucking entertaining. Funny, but also just very serious as well, because it shows sort of what the left, and this is why I want to start with what the left is first and how you can't leave the left necessarily. Okay, this is a common misconception, and I'm seeing this happen quite a bit. And also, when you say that, okay? When you say, I'm sick of the left, I hate the left, I don't like feminism, I hate what the left has become. What you also need to understand, this is what I tried to explain, I explained it on Megan Murphy's thing. I took the time, like I look crazy because I'm a fucking unsolicited essay cunt, right? I wasn't trying to do that. But what I was trying to do is say, look, again, because I'm so used to these fuckwits, like not Megan, but fuckwits in the comments asking me to prove myself. I went, here we go. I'm going to prove myself. Here we go. I'm going to preempt. That's called objection handling, and that links to how right-wingers campaign, and I'll talk about that some other time. But I tried to sort of build in some objection handling around how, first of all, wokes are not even remotely left. If you've been doing any work, as you know, if you've watched my shit, you know what this is. It's like neoliberalism, and I'll explain this. This is what I'm going to define roughly a little bit what it means to be left wing, okay? And in opposition to that, you've got right wing, and then you've got centrist, which is just I just think it's a meaningless term. Again, a lot of these things come from the United States. They have very different meanings in the United States versus everywhere else. And places like Canada and Australia, and those that have very strong US influence, like we're very heavily downwind from the United States, those terms creep in, and that's why it's very important to be very clear on who has what position politically, who has what position economically, and how thinking that leaving the left is how you can be fooled into voting for things that are counterintuitive and not really what you consent to. And I've talked about that before. And really just think this through. And also, and this is not, again, I'm not paid by fucking anybody. I've been asked to do some stuff and campaign, and I said, no, I'm not really interested. I'm happy to have a chat about this stuff so that I'm not going to help anybody. But I have made it clear, I'm not going to help anybody who's preferencing the right-wing party here, because they have a vested interest in collapsing like a lot of government programs. And also just this sort of narcissism of small differences creeping in, and people just not having any sense. This happened the last time. I'm seeing it happen again. People voting against the policies that short-sighted, okay? Yes, again, this is a whole other setup, but, a whole other thing. Because, again, you need to understand how preferences work, so that'll be another thing. But for those who are watching in the United States or the UK or anywhere like that, I'm just going to make it a little bit easier, okay, to understand sort of how we got here with the left, but also that it's not just, suddenly the left decided. See, this is what happens with this. That's a narrative. But what actually happened is the real story, okay? The real story is what happened. And that's why, going back and looking at key events, and that's why, with this internet stuff, unless you've been around as long as I have, you may not be across a lot of this stuff, a lot of these key events. I was there, like there's these things where you go, I know what happened. That wasn't what we were told. I know that. And that's why I'm trying to make sure that these things get told, because obviously Facebook, Google, Apple, United States military, all those sorts of sort of forces, okay, China and Russia, they want to control your brain. They want to control the narrative, and they want to make much like this woke shit, okay, has just decided what left is now and kicked everyone out, okay, gentrification, much like, like that happens across the board, which is that a big pattern with United States. And again, that's not the only one. They're just the most dominant. They're the hegemon. They're the big power. That's the punching up. I don't give a fuck. I have, honestly, anyone else right now is peripheral. Okay, because it's the one that, first of all, pretends it's the good guy. You know, like those people that's like, I don't care if you're evil. I just don't want you to pretend that you're good. That stuff, right? But also, you know, like how this tendency of Americans from the bottom up. This is how you know that this identity shit is from America, because if you believe you can, you can. If you think you are, you are. You know, if you aspire to be something, you will vote in line with your aspirations rather than your material reality, and not put the building blocks in place that will help you to achieve that stuff. Okay. And this is where there's that big lie stuff economically. And a big part of that big lie is what the left is. And this is where misconceptions and, I mean, even if you try to Google what is a left, what is the leftist, they call them liberals. Okay. I'm not a liberal in the strictest sense. Maybe, you know, but again, this is, okay, let's move on from that. So again, loaded language, and you really think about what the words that you say actually mean. And I know that it takes some work, okay, but what I'm trying to do is get you curious, because people are spending an awful lot of time arguing about COVID, arguing about like definitions, going to war. They're spending an awful lot of time doing things and staying busy and, you know, reading stuff when that's propaganda and bullshit, when really you could be spending your time actually just and conspiracy theories. Like, if all the people that went looking at like all this fucking QAnon conspiracy shit actually looked at theory, went back like I did, I went back and I went, okay, this weird thing has happened to the left. There's this sort of been taken over by rich kids and we've been kicked out. What the fuck is going on here? Why are feminists suddenly getting death threats? Why are, you know, working class people being called Nazis? Why? What's the bait and switch? Because I know what the left is. I had a foundation, I had the building blocks in place. But what I can do, and I went back through history and I was like, okay, what events? This is what you do. You go, what events are here? Now, if you go on something like Wikipedia, right, and it's really interesting. I've written about this in the book that fucking chapter 2, might be chapter 3 because I kind of been moving things around, but I write about this, which is when you go to something like Wikipedia, okay, and that is, again, you got to think about who's doing the work, who's behind it, who has the budget, okay, who has the income, who has the lifestyle to be able to do these things for free, okay. Now, if you can do them for free, then that means there's a certain sort of, you know, there's just an economic reality around volunteer work, around, you know, content creation. The only reason I do this is because my husband pays the bills. That's it. But I still, you know, like, I'm used to earning a whole lot more money. I'm just saying, right? The only reason, there's an economic reality around those who do it for free, okay? If you do stuff for free, there's a reality there, which means they either live at home with their parents, and I'll talk about this on Monday because it's pretty funny. But you know, or you know, someone's got to pay the bills. It costs money to live. You got to survive, right? And that was a big part of the anti-work movement, which was that we reject the fact that any human should have their basic needs like healthcare, food, shelter, you know, dependent on, you know, signing these. Sorry, my camera went out of focus. What's going on here? Here we go. That you know, it's just it shouldn't be attached to, you know, like one notch up from slavery and being rented, you know, like it's not, that's not a choice. That's not freedom. Freedom is the ability to voluntarily exchange in these things, not be coerced into it by, you know, the structure. And that's all anarchism is really. It's just that there's a structural thing that compels you and forces you to work, which is funny because that's the voluntarist view on the right. That's it. It's just that you know, people disagree on the how, not the fucking where they want to be. And so, but again, you've got the people who want to exploit, and this is, you know, what Marx had, which is you've got those rent-seeking, okay, people who are there who don't actually, okay, so I don't know if you know what rent-seeking is, okay, exploitation. Define that. What does being exploited mean? What it means is you not fully owning your labor, okay, and someone else who doesn't actually produce goods and services in their own right, but profit from the goods and services of a laborer. Now I'm making of labor, okay? I'm making this very simple. I'm just saying, like, like this idea that, and obviously you can see how exploitation happens in sort of benign and quite evil ways. I would say that, landlords are a good example of, well, that's what rent seeking is, landlords. People who buy housing, okay, and basically they don't really do anything other than have the money to buy the house. And you'll see, like, again, there's some people, and they see it like it's a fucking charity. It's fucking hilarious. I love those fucking landlords. Okay, side point. Those landlords, right, who act like they're fucking giving you a fucking charity. And you go, oh, well, I provide you with accommodation. Hang on. No, I pay a fucking fortune. I maintain your house that would degrade if I didn't live in it. I love those fuckwits. Oh my God, they act like they're doing a public service because they provide housing for people. No, they don't. They fucking profit off people's suffering. It's like, fucking hell. What fucking, you got rocks in your fucking head. Hang on. I don't know what's going on. My camera settings are fucked. Anyway, so what does it mean? Like, this is, again, and this is, it's over the last few years, but I'm seeing this amp up again in the election, okay? And it's obvious what this is because it goes in cycles. It seems to happen about 3 to 6 months in the lead up to an election. Happen in the US, happen in the UK. This is how I know it's a fucking, it's a campaign. Excuse me. And also in Australia, you can campaign, like, and spend whatever you want pretty much on, like, sort of pre-campaign stuff without declaring it, because it's anything that you spend sort of in the lead up to a campaign is under less scrutiny, right? So that's why you'll see Clive Palmer pouring so much money in at the moment, because there's a lead up to an election, but it hasn't been called. So it's slightly different. Like, there's different legal, like, obligations around like spending and all that sort of stuff. I think some regulation's good, given that we've seen that how much fucking corruption happens in America with the freedom to donate to fucking, like, political parties, right? But anyway, some rules are good. Fuckwits exist. We need fuckwit rules, okay? We need rules. Don't need rules for you because you're a good person and you mean well. What we need, and this was what happened with tech, was that we just went, oh yeah, bad guys exist. We forgot about that. Because that's what happens with the silos, is that there's no one that goes, hey guys, did you know that this could be used in bad ways? Like, I was one of those people that said that because obviously, politics, I was like always seeing that political application of these marketing things. I was like, like, if this gets out in fucking, certain areas, it's not going to go well. I was warning about that years ago. But again, you have blind spots. Okay. Everyone thinks that because they do something a certain way or they live a certain way, that everyone else lives that way or shares their knowledge or shares their thoughts. And I think that one thing that you need to sort of get out of if you're going to be a thinking human is an assumption that people are not like you, an assumption that people have, a story of their own. They have, again, that links back to that principle charity, principle humanity stuff, where you just assume that people who are in front of you with a certain opinion come to that opinion for certain reasons. And so it's up to you to persuade them, okay, that, they might have bad information or whatever. Now, if you're dealing with sort of like deeply held stuff, you got to do that gently. You can't just scream at people at how they're wrong and expect it to go well, because obviously there's a first of all, double down in the opposite direction. Second of all, this is like the art of persuasion, which is where, you just kind of nudge people. That's nudging. But anyway, too many concepts. But I'm seeing this in the lead up to the election now. It's happening again, which is there's people who are saying, shit it off with the left, I'm fed up with the left, fucking leaving the left, the right wing aren't so bad. Now, that's cool. You can do what you want to do. And those concerns are actually valid. I think, but if you know what's happening, okay, if you actually know first of all, what it means to be left wing, which I'll get to, okay. because it's very clear. It's most people don't know what it means. I think they think that it's a centre left political party or a brand, rather than deeply held values and a vision for the world and a specific worldview. And so anybody who can just sort of, I've said this before, anyone who can just jump from left to right doesn't know what they're doing, doesn't know anything about politics, and also is just sort of falling for propaganda. Because you know what? The right wing don't give a fuck about anybody other than their own fucking rich mates. They don't. They'll use it to get what they want. Okay, and it might be worth at some point telling you what happened with the Student Guild. And this is where I sort of saw conduct. And I've seen this play out time and time again, this MO, and I've seen it play out in conservative governments as well, which is that they would say whatever it takes to get power and make promises, whatever it takes to win. And then when they win, they'll gut everything that, they'll just dismantle it because they believe in small government, so they'll just dismantle it. But it's also not even it's not even necessarily. Some people obviously believe this. Okay, they obviously believe that smaller government is more efficient, private industry is more efficient, and if you don't regulate, that innovation will happen. Again, I think little utopian, if you ask me. Calling socialist utopia, I think that's a fucking bad thing because you know what? That conveniently ignores facts, which is that psychopaths exist. Well, under capitalism, psychopaths exist. Fuckwits exist. Idiots exist. Okay? Also, it completely ignores most of psychology around social psychology, around groupthink and all that stuff. Like you might be an individually good actor, but in groups with a shared interest, that shit can go bad quickly. Like this is the idea that this conservative stuff is somehow more reasonable or rational, or that's another narrative. It's just a retconning of history. The reality of history is that everyone disagrees all the time. Everyone fucking fights over their differences, okay? Even the left have always fought and always fucking fought, and it's always been super personal over dumb shit. That's what the left do. It's great. But it's also why we can't fucking organise. And this is where the ALP have been quite, like nobody's going to give, and this is, it also links back to sort of pre-election stuff, which is that no one party is going to give you everything you want. And this is this counterintuitive shit where, like, I know you feel strongly about the gender thing, but fucking hell, do you think it's going to be any better? And what's the policy outcome that you want? Like based on history, based on actions. So actions, the history of the conservative governments in this country. Dismantle healthcare, dismantle the universities. And what that does, make university courses more expensive and more inaccessible, and also make it so that poor kids are working in social work and fucking, as labourers in the fucking social work scene, and only rich kids can pay for humanities degrees, which makes it even fucking worse because the rich kids are sitting there deciding the fate of those professions like nurses and fucking doctors. Like those policies might seem sensible because it's short-sighted and you fucking think, oh yeah, we've got to get rid of that woke shit. But what's the actual end result of this stuff? Think it through. Think stages, not past 1 and 2 to 3, 4, 5 and 6. Okay? And it's like, this has always happened. This has fucking always happened. It's one of the fucking things about the left. I know that there's people that will just never fucking hear it anyway. Okay? There's also a split, okay, between activism, organising, okay? So activists are activists. They fucking talk shit. They make pamphlets. They never legislate, okay? On the left, there's very much that divide. I remember that happening in the Greens a lot. Because I was like, well, are we Greenpeace or are we a political party? That's what, it's like that tension is not new. It's always existed. And people have a platform now in which to air those grievances. Okay. Now, publicly. And this is the other thing, which is that left-wing division tends to fucking spill out. Right wingers know how to go. They have a fucking, again, that's just a conservative brain where they have a more sort of a more long-term picture. Again, it links back to the psychology of sort of being left wing. A lot of this stuff is linked to personality. You know, part of it, caring about injustice and caring about sort of these sorts of social issues, wanting everybody to be in a position where we're not left behind, and having the fight in this system to keep going every day with that message. When, you know, to be gaslit and told you're stupid, and to be told you're fucking, you know, infantilized at the age of 40, telling them how the world works. Yeah, I know the fucking world works. Fucking, you lied to me and I know how it fucking works. Tell me how the fucking world works like I'm 12. Okay, I figured out how the world works when I was fucking 8 years old. Okay, it's not designed for me. So anyway, I know how it works. But, you know, again, there's something in your wiring. And there's also a sort of, again, that level of optimism and idealism and all that sort of stuff that comes with that. There's a stupid idealism that comes with, you know, constantly losing all the time, okay? Constantly being fucking, you know, taken over all the time. Constantly being told what we are by the powerful people who are sort of just going, well, we're taking that. We're going to colonize that. We're America now, and you can't say fuck all about it, and we're going to determine what everything means. And because we've got all the shit. We just claimed it. And those are the words. That's what the words mean now. It's like, okay. No, it doesn't. And to be left wing means you need to object to that. So, okay, so what it means to be left wing historically. Okay. So that, again, none of these things have a simple answer. This is up for debate. Part of this anti-work thing. I'm looking forward to Monday. I kind of almost want to do it on like earlier because it's so fucking great. But anyway. But is that the left have always fucking... It's like Monty Python. It really is. Monty Python came from fucking, obviously, those guys having some exposure to left-wing politics. It's just perfect. You know, the people was Judean People's Front versus the Judean people in front of Judea. It's like the narcissism of small differences on the left is so much bigger. Again, that comes with caring. It comes with a lot of different sort of stuff. It comes with collective. Okay, so that, you know, like that, this shat me, right? Jordan Peterson, woke authoritarianism. It's not authoritarianism. It's just that you prioritize the collective and try to fucking tell the collective what the collective should do. It's not necessarily authoritarian. And he knows better than that because he knows better. He's a propagandist at this point. He knows better because authoritarianism is a system of government, okay? If anything, the American government is authoritarian, okay? It's imperialist. It's not, anyway. I would say it's a military dictatorship by proxy, but, you know, haggling, quibbling. They keep us quibbling to distract us from the fucking reality, right? Quibbles. Stop arguing about quibbles. And the definition of quibbles, how you spell quibbles, whether it's quibbles or haggles, stop arguing. Okay? The quibbles. Anyway, so what happened? So the left, what does it mean? So again, this is one of those things where you just say this stuff. Okay, well, what does it mean when you say you're leaving the left? Okay, well, what the fuck does that mean? Have you gone to a meeting and physically left the meeting because you didn't like what people were talking about? Are you talking about voting? Are you talking about, in America, they pre-register to vote for their political party, okay? It's a bit weird. So they already sort of, they're part of it, but they're not in the party. So here you have to be, if you're in a political party, you are in it, you are turning up to meetings, or you are, giving them money already. Okay, that's something where it's like you're in it. So to leave the left, okay, what political party did you leave? What meeting did you walk out of? What faction within that political party did you walk out of? For example, In the Labor Party, there's various factions. In the Greens, I mean, used to say they don't have factions. But again, people, they have factions, but it's just, activist factions. And, again, that whole, whether you believe in sort of revolution versus reform, or whether you think that, the system needs completely changing from the ground up, or whether you think that you can tinker away at the edges of it, okay? I think more and more people are realizing it needs to be we need a reset. Right? And again, you see this fucking Great Reset conspiracy shit coming from the United States. Yeah, probably happening. But what that is everybody around the world turning and going, you know what, America? Your way doesn't work. You need a different way. It's not, it's such, again, the way that it's spun. But also, yes, there's also, you can see the Great Reset is a great example of how that sort of communist, socialist language is cherry-picked and spat back out to sort of sound like a weird version of it, but somehow it ends up with 7 people owning it all. It's bizarre because dumb people on the right turn around and go, okay, well, that sounds like communism, because it's been decoupled from economics. Okay, and be decoupled from history and decoupled from all this stuff. They go, that's communism, which is fucking stupid. And they go, it's not communist if billionaires own it, mate. Sorry. Anyway, again, it's just left wing. What does it mean? I got my pencil back, but I'm on Windows, so the sharing is a bit harder. Okay. Oop. Fucking dickhead. Where's my script? Here we go. This is a basic political compass. Okay? Hang on. Let's get this here. That's better. A basic political compass. Left wing. Right wing. Okay. Now, what does that mean? And what the fuck here? Centrist, whatever the fuck. This is what you learn in sort of year 5 civics. Okay. Now, you also have, this is the political compass that I've referred to. Okay. So you have authoritarian. Okay. Libertarian. Okay. So, left and right, okay. This generally, okay. It's actually fucking again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is stuff that you might be familiar with. But you want to see how, and I talked about this in Roderick's interview as well, where this is a model coming out of the United States, okay. And this was something that kind of tweaked my interest not long ago, a few years ago now, where they had Marx up here, which was odd, okay. And they had Hitler up here, which was odd, and Stalin, okay. And then they had sort of, Bernie Sanders sort of here. Bernie Sanders is more here, right? And then you had sort of, the big L libertarian sits here, okay? The big L American libertarian is here, okay? Now, that, again, I haven't really explained this. It's kind of by the by. I just wanted to, give you a quick understanding if you haven't seen it before. That's what it means, okay? Now, to sit on the left or the right, okay? Left, right. What that meant was in the Parliament, after the Revolution, you had this person, the Speaker or whatever you call it, okay? In the middle, to the left of the chamber, you had your revolutionaries, okay? And here you had your aristocracy, okay, or king people, right? Conservatives, people, establishment, right? Roughly. Now, that's literally left, right. They sat left right of the chamber. Post-revolution, trying to repair and figure things out. And this was the cleavage, okay? Now, the cleavages existed here, which was around economics, okay, and how they arranged society, how they rearranged things, policy, all of that sort of stuff. So you'll see that play out in politics now, where you'll see that roughly those parties sit like this in the chambers, roughly wherever they are. That's just a sort of thing. Okay, so literally left and right of the chamber. Now, again, I'm trying to not go drill too down. There's lots and lots and lots. What you need to understand, okay, is how much loaded language is in one single model. Like, what does authoritarianism mean? What does left mean? What does revolution mean? Okay, so even just the word So even just the word revolution, what does that mean? What do you think of when you think of revolution, right? You think of guillotines, you think of, violence, okay? But there's a split there in the left. You got violent revolution, okay? Non-violent revolution, okay? And some of that stuff is like what I've talked about before, which is like, malicious compliance, take it down from within, okay? Passive resistance, protest, all of those sorts of things. You try to create change and revolution and restructure society and restructure, the economy around that stuff. But again, what's happened is over time, those that want to demonize anyone who wants to sort of stand up, they create a fucking, they're synonyms. They become synonyms in your head, symbols. So when you think of revolution, you think of violence, okay? And so what you start to see is the left disagreeing because they go, well, no, that's not what revolution is. There's lots of different ways to achieve it, okay? And revolution isn't an outcome. There's people who, okay, so this is where I'm not going to go too much into theory, but, even Marx and they all disagreed on it. This is why James Lindsay's a fucking idiot. Because Marx was actually criticising Hegel, right? He wasn't part of his fucking tribe. He wasn't in his part. It's like, who's the authoritarian collectivist if you think that everyone's thinking the same and like pulling, and you can pull rank and everyone pulls rank? That's an inherently authoritarian worldview. Whereas if you have an egalitarian worldview, you believe that there's all sorts of ideas, okay, matter. Everyone gets a say, right? There's no hierarchy, okay? So what's funny is to watch a right-winger turn around and accuse sort of the left-wing thinkers of hierarchy. There's all this projection built into it because the left are anti-hierarchy, okay? This is why that intersectionality thing, it's obviously inherently right-wing because they've, again, when you understand the authoritarian like personality and the way that it works and operates, it's like you are not left-wing if you try to enforce too much hierarchy. Again, this is stuff that you need to sort of really understand how the sort of bait and switch and tricks of language and, all that thought termination. So when you think of revolution, you'd instantly think of violence, okay? That's not on, again, like I said, people just act like these things happen organically or that somehow, but it's like there's people who decide these things along the way. Like with the Western canon and, what's Western civilization and what does this mean and what does that mean? Well, we don't know what it means, but the people who have access to the printing press decided what things meant. They had the debate, they had these conversations. Now, as that conversation sort of became more accessible to people or, people were more free to speak, okay, and society, as we move forward, becomes more and more egalitarian and listens to more and more people, that's going to get messy. It's going to get messier. But at the end of the day, to define left and right, okay, you don't like. You are pro-environment. You care about the environment. Okay? That's a pillar. Okay? There's you give a shit about like what we're doing to this planet because we're future oriented. Okay? We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about making the world a better place. Okay? Not making the world a better place Silicon Valley style, but actually making the world a better place. Silicon Valley is amazingly self-aware production from coming out of the United States. Okay? It's a work of genius, that show. So environment, okay. You're largely egalitarian. Okay. Now again, all of these things, what does it mean? 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 I think this. I think this. I believe this. I believe this. You're a cunt. You stink. Get off. Fuck off, hippie. Fuck off. That's the left. Right? I'm going to burn your fucking house down because I'm a violent revolutionary and I'm going to try and bring this fucking thing to a head before anybody has time to put their boots on. That's what it is. Different people. Some people fucking want shit now and they want revolution and they won't be happy till they get it. Others, like, you know, the fun character of the anti-work movement, you know, they believe in just withdrawing themselves from you know, labor. I have a more pragmatic view, which is that, you know, much like I think Marx was very similar. He played the stock market and he, you know, it doesn't mean there's no fucking money and you don't fucking have stuff. Okay. It means that you own your labor and you get paid fairly for your labor. And, you know, like some people just think that, you know, but again, there's an argument for, with automation and all that stuff, having a conversation about what it means to work. And so on the right, this idea of work means you must be indentured or you must be exploited. Like in order to be seen as productive and working, you need to be exploited. And that's where you go, well, okay, well, the left go, well, no, that's, you know, there's other meaningful work, domestic labor, feminism, you know, there's intangible work, create arts, you know, entertainment, you know, innovation, thinking, writing, you know, all of the stuff that's not necessarily, you know, doesn't necessarily make you money. That's the main thing, make you money and others money. But it makes society better and progresses society and includes more, you know, has a broader range of definitions. Okay, that's generally what the left is. It's like there's a broader range of definitions for everything, and we kind of tend to go, okay, well, what does work mean? Work can be expanded to include. That's what inclusion should be, and that's why this weird psyop weapon is fucking of wokeism is the way that it is. So egalitarian, right? So redistribution. So those who, now again, this is, the how is not the point, okay? These are broad concepts who are like just highly contested, but this is what it roughly means in terms of economics, okay? So you prioritize, but also that this, again, this whole social versus economics, that was an interesting one, okay? To be on the left means that you don't actually differentiate between those two things, really, unless you're outside of the United States. There's this weird thing to kind of separate those two. And I don't know if you noticed, but I asked that question, like, what about healthcare, where it's both, or education, where it's both? They're all both. Like everything is social and everything is economic. Economics is a social science. It's an interesting sort of, again, that whole, okay, what does that mean? What do you mean to be like socially, like, okay, economically conservative? Well, that buys the myth that socialism is somehow economically irresponsible and not based in economic principles, which it is. It's just more in terms of, you know, like labor theory of value and like it's a whole bunch of it, fucking economics, like Keynesian economics, all that stuff's fucking based in something. It's not just sitting around like hippies. And this is where even the left, we kind of internalize all this propaganda over the years that, you know, this self-loathing lefty thing where it's like you don't want to be seen to be a stinky hippie. That shit works. And that'll talk about that on Monday. But you don't want to be seen to be some naive, dumb, fucking idealist, stinky hippie who has no idea how the world works. It's like, yeah, I know how the world works. It works like this. Here's left and right wing. So now right wing, again, so you've got collectivist. Okay, now again, that's simplistic as well. Now, you Google collectivism. Like again, Google what left wing mean. They go, oh, collective. That means that the group is more important than the individual. So, well, actually, no, that's not true. What it was that Marx actually talked about phases. So it didn't say, okay, here's this utopian idea of this egalitarian society where people, you know, get their needs met and have this ultimate libertarian utopia. Okay. But in order to get there, certain things need to happen. Okay, the state has a role in certain places. Again, I'm explaining it very simply and butchering a lot of this stuff. It's very fucking, there's always some dude in the comments in the fucking essay. You know what, I'm just speaking generally for people who don't know what it actually fucking means to be left, and they keep saying they're left and they're not. And right-wingers who say that they're on the right and they're not. Like, this actually cuts both ways, which is that one thing that I've actually said to a couple of people already is I don't think that you're actually on the right. I think you're, or a centrist. I think you're actually just a socialist and have fucking internalized an awful lot of propaganda. Okay. So, redistribution. So this is like linked to the welfare state. Now there's a whole bunch of American bullshit. So, now, environment, people are more important than profit. Okay. This is sort of where that is. Okay. You care about sort of that sort of stuff. Again, on the left, you're largely in the socialist tradition. Okay. Now, another thing, again, this whole fucking Jordan Peterson woke authoritarian shit. Yeah, it is. It's coming from the US government to stop the socialists. They're not Marxists. Like, it's just stupid. If you've read it, you understood it, and you actually understand history and what's actually happened outside of the fucking, it's just so frustrating. Anyway, again, Jordan Peterson may be wrong, and I'm not saying he's lying. I'm saying his wrongness is useful. Different things. Now, so what does it mean to be right-wing? Okay. Let's erase all that shit. Okay. What does it mean to be right-wing? Generally means individualism. Okay. Now, I haven't dedicated as much into right-wing philosophy. Okay, I'm just going to say like right-wing economics and all of those sort of things. So if I'm strawmanning the right, that's because I can only do so much. And but this is, again, I'm talking generally where you fit economically. There's always exceptions. I'm not making the left more complex and the right less complex. Okay, the right has its own complexities as well, especially when it comes to like religion and those sorts of things. Okay, it's very much related to religion. But in history, the right wing have generally believed in God or some kind of God. Okay, generally. Okay, and again, I think that lies psychologically in, that's where you know who you are. And your worldview largely determines your politics, because if you believe in God, you think you can escape this planet and there's a better life for you, okay? And that no matter what you do, no matter how you treat people, as long as you follow the book and you follow this book, even though they don't follow it most of the time, but they follow it, they're not necessarily attached to the earth, okay? Again, and the contrast to that, if you are an atheist, again, generally speaking, if you're an atheist, then you're more concerned with what you leave behind, what your legacy is, passing, it's not, again, that comes from collectivism and individualism, right? If you're an individual, you're more concerned with your relationship with God rather than fellow man and how you treat people and your own morality. They all link together, okay? Now, hierarchy. This is why the libertarians in the US fucking make it very strange. Because they ultimately believe in hierarchy. They just think they should be at the top of it. Okay, generally. Straw manning, I know. Generally speaking. All this haggling over concepts is actually a distraction. And you've got to understand this stuff in the broader. Now, so what you could do is sit there haggling over collectivism and individualism. And you go, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, Marx would argue that collectivism, okay, is actually like, it's not so much about building organizing society in that way, because the ultimate goal is liberty, individual liberty with socialism, okay? What it is that this is an interim role that the state plays post-revolution to achieve that, okay? Now, I know that's boring. That's boring shit. But it's important, because people just say these words like they're just a given. Where do those words come from? Who's telling it to you? Okay. If you were being people fucking take more on face value with politics and political terms than they do with a fucking used car. It's like you should assume that that politicians and journalists and used car salesmen, do you know why they are fucking where they are in the trustworthy scale and ladder? People take these things for fucking, like that you can't just hoodwink a whole bunch of people with propaganda for 100 years and there be no fucking outcome. And this is the outcome, which people don't know what words mean. It's just an extension of that. Anyway, what does it mean to be left wing? So, this idea that, you are so, but again, with economics, there's not no fucking market. It's just like it challenges the idea that there is one way to run a market, which is one of exploitation. Okay. One of and again, this whole authoritarian libertarian. So you've got your LRA. Okay. Now, so on the left, so this is where the Americans, it's really interesting if you could just study it through models and semiotics of political models. It's fucking fascinating. And the story behind them. Because this left-right axis, not satisfied with, oh, well, that's the aristocracy, that's the queen, that's the powerful. This is the people who fucking chopped heads off and they want to fucking say on either side of the chamber and, trying to figure out shit between them. Now, there's obviously cleavages there. How do you organize the economy? You never, again, I don't think socialism and capitalism are necessarily intractable. There are parts of it that are. So Keynes, actually, John Maynard Keynes, you might hear of Keynesian economics. He's kind of, again, it's not about a middle ground or compromise. What it is it's finding what works and what is a new way to do things, to find solutions that sort of, deal with cleavage. There's some things that you're just not going to agree on. Like the women and trans thing, it's a cleavage. It's not going to be resolved necessarily. But what you need is a policy. You need a solution. So those that are digging their heels in and saying those guys are fucking, doesn't work. It's unproductive. At the end of the day, you've got these gaps. Okay. God is real. God is not real. God is all-knowing, all-seeing, and should fucking dictate all of our decisions. I don't think that's true. Those are you can't just suddenly change that, but you've got to figure out a way to live together and compromise and find ways around that. Now, this is where the authoritarian, libertarian fucking axis kicks in, okay, which is that there's all these people that go, my way is the right way, up here. My way is the right way and the only way. And libertarians are more like, well, let's figure it out. Actually, again, this is quite simple, but it's just, my way is the only way and the right way. Now, unfortunately, with the internet and the fucking dark triad, being linked to trolls and dark triad and all these things, you'll see a lot of authoritarians on the internet. Again, it's their profile. But anyway, that's just whatever. I'm going to stop scribbling now. Hang on, let me just turn that off. But what you'll see, okay, is what does it mean to be on the left? Do you think we should protect the environment? Okay, yeah. Do you think we should organise society in a way where people have a fair go and actually get a chance? Or do you think that, or do you trust authority? Do you believe in hierarchy? And do you believe in tradition? And again, this is not, people move in and around, but at the end of the day, those things are, they're in conflict with each other. This is the for or against. Now, this is where the political party has become a problem because people have married those things with the political party. Democrats are a centre-right party, okay, in that sense, because they're not socialists. Bernie Sanders is still a social democrat. The furthest, I find it funny how social democrats are called communists. It's like, dude, they're literally like the centre. Anyway, centre left. But it's fascinating. So, but again, outside of the US, and then you got these centrists, and it's like, well, what does that mean? So you want something that doesn't exist? What do you mean? What does centrist mean? It means independent and, case by case stuff. Depends on the issue. It doesn't mean that you sit in the middle, you fucking idiots. Because you can't. Because there's a massive, fracture or gap. So politics is very much about this cleavage theory. I've talked about that before, which is that there are just certain things where they don't work together. But when you're trying to run a government and organise a society, okay, you can't, somebody trying, you see this play out online with, well, Joe Rogan is a good example. So if he's a libertarian, right? Okay. He agrees with individual left policies, but let's say he's like, he kind of falls in that like Elon Musk libertarian camp. And you try to convince someone like Joe Rogan that he has a responsibility to his audience to make sure that he's not irresponsible. You know, how do you get into that, right? So it's not so much. So when you are that there's a conflict there. That's another libertarian. Collectivist individualist sort of mindset, right? Which is, how does me, somebody who tends to think that, again, on the collectivist spectrum, so to speak, okay, or at least thinks that, you know, pure individualism is not an attainable thing in the current system because there are economic forces, there are bad guys, you know, all of those things that will take advantage of vulnerable individuals in society. Like that, if there's any like utopian view, it ain't fucking Marxism. Okay, it's this fucking like neoliberal capitalism. That's the utopia. This is the great switch of fucking America, is that they say the opposite of what they are all the time. They identify as things, right? But it's again culturally, not individual, you know, whatever. I don't think I've got any Americans. Anyway, so but trying, this is how this interacts in a sort of a daily, but in a daily conversation, right? So me, I think that you should look after everybody, and that people with more resources, more power, you know, all of those things should take that power and not and they have a responsibility and a duty of care. Okay, again, people on the right would agree with like that there's a duty of care, but a lot of it is probably what the government says you can't do, and it limits you versus your disposition. So like you saying, okay, well, don't you think that you should think about other people? Like, is that not a reflex for you? And it's like, well, again, I don't, much like, again, this is where a conservative versus right wing, left wing are sort of complicated, okay? Because you either care about other people and you see yourself as part of a whole and part of, you know, a society and all those things, or you see yourself as somebody who's on their own and, you know, fighting for yours and your people and your lot and your, you know, and you believe that. That's a whole worldview that's very hard to, you know, you can't, you either are that way or you're not, okay? But this is why when I say that's like collectivism is very broad, and it's, you know, this is why the quibbles are pointless, because you just need to know that where you roughly sit and who you vote for, it's not just, oh, the right wing are bad people. It's like, no, the right wing have a tendency to exploit this stuff because they're every man for himself, okay, generally, laissez-faire, right, all this stuff. It's like, of course they're going to have Lord of the Flies, because the Lord of the Flies people largely hang out over there. Fucking hippy-dippy, like, love people. Again, not stinky, but just, you know, generally speaking, not naive, but just have a different worldview, tend to be more about looking after people, okay. And on the right, they tend to outsource that to the church. I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying, like, you know, do you outsource your thinking or not? That's another one. I'm just kidding. I'm joking sometimes. But this is where you got to think deeper about these things. Like, what does it mean to be on the left? Do you believe in looking after your fellow man? Do you believe in giving everyone a shot? Now, the quibbles over differences, okay, that's always happened. Always happened. But what has also happened is that when you understand the history around the aggression, okay, and all of the money, all the resources, all of the time, all of this energy that has come from the right in order to kill and squash and prove socialism wrong. I have a feeling that if you have to put that much fucking effort into something, you might be wrong. Just saying, if you need, like with a kid, fist fight's no way to solve an argument, is it? Usually, if you've got the gift of the gab and you can talk your way out of it, you don't end up in a fight. Okay, and that's probably where we're at. But what's happened is over time, like we've managed to find those like little gaps between sort of those little splinters. Like this is stuff the CIA did. Like you can look that shit up. They've been dedicating. I find it ironic that they've spent more fucking money on all this shit than giving people healthcare, and like seems like it might be a bit cheaper. But this demonization of the left is so when you so either your politics are deeply held and like linked to who you are and your worldview, or it's basically like an accessory that you use for yourself. Okay, it's an accessory that you use for it's like a brand, and it is something that if your views are that malleable, I question who you are, like whether you know who you are as a person. Okay, now that can be, again, like it's not meant to be condescending. I'm just saying, generally speaking, this applies as much for someone who leaves the right for the left as leaves the left for the right. Okay, it's not so much. It's making sure that you know what your principles and politics are. If you believe in God and you believe in hierarchy, you believe in tradition, you believe in, that kids today are fucking, all that sort of stuff. If you think it's every man for himself, if you think all of those sorts of things, okay, that then you're probably on a conservative, okay? And if you're like on the woke, if you think that identity matters more than, say, collective, if you're more worried about cancelling someone to look good, then you're authoritarian in your thinking, or all of these things, then you're leaning, again, this is just political leaning, okay, in terms of disposition, in terms of values and worldview. Your disposition is that of conservative, okay? Now, the problem is we've got a lot of stupid fucks in between who just don't know what politics is. And this is part of the problem, where it's like, okay, well, people just vote for a party that they like, who says what they like, and then fucks them, okay? Now, I'm not saying that the left-wing parties have not failed, okay? But unfortunately, we tend to have shit fights in public. But this stuff is always up for debate. It's always like just constantly moving. Like that's the beauty of democracy and pluralism, and it's why free speech, again, is something that probably comes more from the left than the right. And I have a feeling that the right wing are using free speech in order to when you actually look at the data around network propaganda, they're not fighting for your fucking speech, okay? They're fighting for the right to like run whatever propaganda they want to run, okay? And it's the same thing with this woke shit. They're trying to fight for the right to run the content and propaganda that they want without anybody challenging it. Okay? If you rub up against the woke, usually or the right, it usually means that you're fucking like saying something that rubs up against like powerful forces like corporations or the US government, or dominant narratives, or patriarchy, or anything like that. That's a good sign. Like for me, I find it interesting when you look at what both sides leave out, and you generally start to figure out what the interests are. So, I mean, this isn't going to be a class on like, I'm not a high school teacher. I'm not a teacher, but what I'm trying to do is get you to think more and go, okay, what does it mean? Go on Wikipedia, spend half a day, look up socialism and how many different versions there are. Okay, look at the history of this stuff and how people have like, we'll talk about that on Monday. But how these things are used, but also how, this is where people like sort of like Antonio Gramsci fits in, and Noam Chomsky, and all these thinkers. There's no like, if you think, again, this comes back to the psychology of people who are on the left versus the psychology of the people who are on the right. Like people who are on the right traditionally, okay, there's been no switch. This is a lie being told. They haven't switched. You've been recruited, okay? Because you think that they, like, if you look at the fucking ads that are running, like, what's the policy outcome? They're voting, the Republican Party is going to get in, okay? which means that they're going to block all the fucking legislation in all of the houses all of the time and fucking dismantle every like social program that exists. They're going to go, universities are under attack. You're not going to get healthcare. Oh, but like, oh, well, Dave Rubin's gay, so it must be fine. Like, it's like, what the fuck, people? Okay? They're aligned with fundamentalist Christians and all this stuff. Again, I'm not saying that, again, this is me talking to people who are on the left, who keep saying they're leaving the left, or, right-wingers who seemingly think that they're on the right when through everything that they've said and agree with, they're actually probably on the left when it comes down to policy. Okay? Now, and this is all United States shit. It's not even... Like, if you call yourself a centrist in Australia when we've got a multi-party system, you're in the Labor Party. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, like, this is where it's like, well, do you know how it works? I tweeted this yesterday. I was like, I'm pretty sure that in order to know if a government's fallen or not, you need to know how it works. It's true. It's like, that's what it is. It's like, you need to, like, you don't, how do you know if you're leaving the left if you can't even define what it means? And it's like, well, yeah, in America, that means what? The Democrats? Well, then start a new party. Push for another party and say, no, I'm still left. They're not left. You don't say I'm leaving the left, because what that does is creates and feeds this narrative over here for your opponent to make you look dysfunctional and ineffective and, disorganized. Well, if they can't do that, then how can they run the economy? Joe Biden's a communist. Okay. But also, I also was saying left wing is also anti-imperialist generally, okay? Like, a big part of being on the left is not liking colonialism, not liking massive amounts of power, not liking, expansionism and all that sort of stuff, generally being opposed to things like kings and aristocracy and, all of that sort of stuff. And also that comes down, that also, hegemony. Hegemony is dominant force. Okay, so there's one big force. Okay, global superpower. But hegemony also creates homogeny, cultural homogeny. Okay, so it's like a weird, stupid, boring theory. But you've also got, so what the bait and switch has been is that you've been anti-imperialist, right? So anti-expansion, anti-war, pro-environment, all of this revolution, right? Just, egalitarianism. Now, feminism has sort of sat outside of that historically. Like, it's like we've found, it's found allies in the movement, but the feminists aren't the left. Right? Generally, it's just because of like-minded goals and values that they sit separate from each other. Fascism sits outside of this political spectrum. Okay, these are weird. These are kind of outliers from that core broad idea. Like, there's lots of complicating stuff. Now, this is why I see this whole sort of complicating. I find it very funny why it's been interesting to see why people are haggling over the definition of obscure terms that really ultimately are just part of a broad school, and like, we're all trying to figure stuff out, and we take all these ideas as part of a big toolkit and, try to solve problems. Like, that's what these things are. But somehow people have built cults around like one book. It's just bizarre. Again, inherently right-wing idea. Because, again, trying to form hierarchy where none should really exist. And again, it's like, okay, well, you're conservative. If you like hierarchy and respect authority, that's a inherently authoritarian right-wing view. Now, what I'm saying might annoy you, because you've been told that there's this thing called horseshit theory. And what that was is a model that basically post Stalin and post Hitler and all that sort of stuff, fascism. The horseshoe theory is some idea that that fascism and communism are somehow this super close together, both violent, completely different fucking historical context, completely different environment, completely different, lots and so many different fucking things, leaving out the facts. They just go, oh yeah, they were bad. Let's put them here. They were both really bad and ended badly. Let's put them next to each other. What we'll do is we'll make it so that it's actually, politics isn't a spectrum, but it's a circle. So let's draw it like this. And around that, you've got communism here, and then you draw it round. Okay? And over here, you've got these bad things, and centrism is in the middle, and it's the furthest away. That's where you think you're a centrist. Doesn't work that way. But what it did was create, again, like, look at the symbols. Look at what you're being told. Okay. But what's interesting is that when you start to look at the symbols, you start to see how interests, anti-communist interests, anti-socialist thinking, anti-left, okay, real left thinking, utilizes all of these tools and all of these things, and it adapts to the way that the left conduct our thinking and conduct our organizing and conduct our behavior. So like the horseshoe theory, okay, this is quibbles. If you're going to write me an essay, I'm not writing essays, I'm fucking just trying to have a conversation, right? But I'm saying this is the application of it. This is just, I'm not a teacher. I'm not your fucking, whatever. I'm not going to say anything that you can't just look up or refer to. This is my own thinking, which is that what that does is that when you've internalized that false equivalency forever. So what they do is they accuse everyone of being whatever fucking version of that horseshoe theory that is convenient. I'm the center, but you're far right. I'm the center, but you're a communist. And it's like, well, hang on. No, those actually mean things. Actually mean words. And to reduce things down, anything down to a model is stupid, right? And simplistic. But you think about where these things fit in your mind. What does that circle do? Okay. Now, I'm not saying that Stalin wasn't bad. Like everyone's just, oh well, if you fucking say that Stalin and Hitler aren't the same, you're a communist. Yeah, that's because you've been told that, because you've internalized this fucking spectrum, this propaganda model, ironically. But basically the way that this works is that it comes back to what I was saying about people just thinking these things exist. Like the Bible. They go, oh yeah, that exists. Who wrote it? Men wrote it. Who wrote it? Men with a pen at the time. Okay, well, they had interest. They had a story they wanted to tell. They chose what was in that book. They weren't fucking transcribing the word of God necessarily. That's a leap of faith. Maybe they were. Maybe they were schizophrenic and all thought they were having fucking conversations with God. Who the fuck knows? I'm saying someone wrote that book. Okay? And that's the same thing with someone created these models. Who created these models? How were they used? How were they utilized? All of these things. Now, when you see a lot of this stuff where a lot of the post-war conversation around like this anti-communist narrative that just keeps going through history, again, through events. When you know what happened, history through events is a really good way. Again, through the science, you know how humans behave. You know roughly how supply and demand works. You know roughly how economics works, okay? Hopefully. Most people don't, but hopefully. You can kind of extrapolate a little bit where the interests lie and who benefits from these things. But, none of this stuff just springs up out of nowhere. There's people who own these things, okay? People who, like I talked about in a previous stream about how, uniformity around spelling and words was determined by the typesetters and the people who owned the printing presses. Typesetters determined it because it was too expensive to keep switching out plates and changing the plates. So they created some uniformity around that. Okay. That's an interesting idea. That's interesting. I go, oh yeah, capitalism fucking, prevails. But there's always this for profit, exploitation, profit. Now, Marx, that's all Marx said. Throughout history, that's the common thread. When you look at the events of history and you look at these things, this is how you do it, okay? It goes a certain way. Now, there's also people who go, all right, Marx, you said revolution's inevitable. I disagree. So that's called the determinist view. Okay, deterministic view. Gramsci said, well, that's all well and good in an ideal world, okay? He said that. It was basically, not an ideal world, but basically he went, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, Marx, fuckwit. You hurt my feelings. I'm walking out and I'm leaving the left. I'm going to announce on Instagram that I am to get followers. But Gramsci said basically that in practice that's not what happens, because the middle class and all of the cultural institutions, okay, so like, think of, Twitter, think of it, okay, you can look at Gramsci and Twitter and Facebook, cultural institutions, so media, your clubs, your bowling alleys, all these things, they all need money under capitalism, right? Which means that by nature of capitalism existing, okay, the fact that you need money to eat, to live, means that at some point you need to trade off or be exploited in some way in order to participate in society. Now, because those institutions exist, this is the superstructure, okay? So schooling, clubs, food, food producers, everything throughout culture, okay, is driven by profit. People are going to compromise on that and work towards the interests of the upper class or the ruling class, whether they agree to it or not. Like I'm seeing that with my election project, right? The fact that my husband works for the richest man in Australia, like that's going to, because my ability to do this. So I'm not going to say, I'll be honest and open about that. And I'll say, well, he's got an NDA. I can't, it's like, well, that's just the fucking life. But you could apply Gramsci to that, which is that I then am not free. Again, I'm not saying there's anything, I'm not saying there's nothing going on. If anything, I'm like, fuck, it's a good guy. But I'm just saying, like, it's just, the world's complicated and more complicated than a simple, like revolution is inevitable. And what we're seeing here, like with a lot of this sort of stuff, is the United States knowing that and knowing really, actually, they understand their Gramsci better than anybody, I think. And they study this stuff and they learn to preempt it, and it learns to adapt. And this is where that woke shit is just adaptive. It's just an adaptive thing to keep people arguing about stuff like Marvel movies and fucking. This is why it came out of the fandoms as well, because it's just, there's a psychology component to this, which is that you get the most intense fans, young people, teenagers, and give them little like pieces of philosophy that's a fucking chew toy and a distraction, and they grow up into being the superstructure, and they grow up into being these like right-wing fucking mouthpieces for who pretend to be the left. Like, you can just see how this plays out. But this was Gramsci, which was, on the left, it was basically like, well, it's not inevitable. Revolution isn't inevitable because it's fought over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, it's like the war on communism is actually the thing. So it's not so much that it's not just exploitation. You can't just reduce it down to exploitation and workers finally having enough. What you need to know is that the fucking odds are so against us because they own everything, and they fucking own us, that it's that they can actually like exert that influence and control over people who fucking haven't read your books, Marx. Okay. And so this is something that's just been perfected over time, which is that, that real, like it's odd to me that, people don't know that like socialism is basically just reorganizing the economy so that everyone gets a go. So the first clue for me was when this woke shit was calling, the working class a dog whistle for the right. Like, that actually gave me chills, because I went, nah, they're not right. They're not lefties. They're not like that. Also, fucking socialists wouldn't cancel someone for working. If you've read your Gramsci and you've read your Marx, you wouldn't cancel someone. Also, you're authoritarian, which means you're a fucking right-winger. Also, you live in America. You're a right-winger. Also, you write fucking this fanfic full-time for free. I think you're quite rich in America and not terribly based in theory. Okay. And a lot of those things, they're all lots and lots of signals that tell you that they're right wingers. Okay. If you know your political compass and you know what the priorities are, you see through it. And this is what it means to have that whole class consciousness thing. So Gramsci actually said that, like it's one thing to have, you can't bring about class consciousness is if everything is stacked against people figuring out how much power they've got. Okay. And everything tells them and replaces and this capitalism being super adaptive. Okay. Now I know that this is like quite long and I've talked way too long and I probably haven't really educated, but I'm saying like, what does it mean to leave the left when you say you're leaving the left? And are you helping? So also, policy outcome. So there's also the political aspect of left versus right. What do you support? The left have traditionally supported social programs, education, accessible education for everybody, publicly funded stuff. And also, again, that's not just the left. If you have quibbles over whether government should do it or not, still means you're on the left. It just means you're a libertarian and you're a statist and you're more in that sort of probably Leninist. But, some people just think that stuff's transitory towards that sort of, liberty. Some people believe that reform is better and peaceful revolution, which never fucking happens because obviously, again, that's asymmetrical because the warfare that you're subjected to, even trying to have peaceful protest is impossible. I mean, look at Wall Street Bets and what happened there, under attack, right? It's just not. Look what happens with feminism. Like it's just the level of fucking opposition is just too powerful and too motivated to keep you quiet and too motivated to scare you and be violent. And there comes a point where reform is not really possible. And that's what I'm coming to as well, because I used to be sort of more in the reform camp. But I think in the last few years, I'm like, no, fuck this shit. We've tried asking nicely. Fuck it. But I also don't, I don't support that stuff. I generally don't, it's not in my wiring. But there are some that are. And I wish them luck. And I will have a beer and I'll laugh and watch. And I won't be sad when it happens. But at the same time, that's the thing where it's like you've got a minor gripe with the left over something that's always been there. It's always been a cleavage. Like feminists don't own the left any more than trans people own the left, and they don't own, no one interest group owns the left any more than any other. And if you believe in that, it means that you inherently believe in hierarchy, which means that you need to question whether you're actually left-wing. Do you see what I'm saying here with the psychology of this stuff? Now, this is why I really like the fact that I'm rounding out my psych training with this, because I want to be able to say that I'm a political psychologist. But so anyway, it's sorry, I got spam here. Add to block list, block user. Okay. So I don't think anyone's really interacting, so what I will do is just turn it off. But you see what I'm saying? You've got to kind of, again, there's been a theme with what I'm saying, which is that you've got to think things through. Think through the next thing. What is this? Am I actually just saying this without parroting? And this is another right-wing fucking, I've seen this nudging that happens to people who leave the left and the walk away movement. Very clever propaganda. Which is that they start saying, oh, well, I was just taking things on face value and not thinking it through. And that's the problem of the left. And I was like, well, no, you were taking things on face value and not thinking things through. And now you're taking things on face value and not thinking things through, but you're right wing. And the thing is that as much as I get frustrated, sometimes, the package is fucking annoying, but the message is correct, which is, these woke people who are they're trying to, they're bad at their words. Okay, I understand that. I don't often articulate things as clearly as I'd like either. But there's a valid criticism to this idea that once you head on that track, you're kind of right. You're either there or you're right wing all along. And I think that a lot of people just discover that they always were. And that's why it's like, it's not necessarily bad faith for something like someone who says they're leaving the left to go, well, you were never left wing. It's not a purity thing. It is actually just having a grounding in what it means, what it is, okay, and history, and also knowing that, you know, like left is a really attractive costume in the entertainment industry, okay, being counter. But the problem is that the right have also, there was also the other part of history, which is that in the US, there's two different lefts. There's the US left and the rest, and, you know, obviously there's different, you know, pockets around the world, but you've got, you know, your sort of US fucking hegemonic left and sort of worker-oriented movements around the world that have been sort of more based in, you know, like strikes and, you know, labor organizing and materialism and all that sort of stuff. In the 60s, you know, like it's called the New Left movement, right? Where they decided to focus on just activism and words. And that's when all these fucking organizations and, you know, everyone's sort of bucking it. Capitalism did its thing. All these fucking organizations and charities. Hippies became a fucking movement and a brand as much as it was a fucking you know, like, because what it was, again, people just said that, all the hippies got together and decided that this was going to happen. No. What happened was there was potential for revolution. Now, this is off the back of this civil rights movement, right? Where they didn't want to see that shit happening again. They wanted to contain that shit. Because more shit was happening. Off the back of the civil rights movement, people started to get some sense that they could actually fucking change things. Okay, now again, I'm simplifying. Again, history has its details, the quibbles of history, okay, with the unsolicited essays, people, and bros, where they go into like a minor fucking thing where I misspoke with missing the overall message of what I'm saying, and the overall story is how it works. And how it silences you because it makes you question yourself and all that stuff. I probably misspeak. I'm skimming over stuff. And this is more of an alternative story. The hippie movement didn't just decide to use Coca-Cola. Okay? Coca-Cola used the hippies. But this was something where they also knew that there was this rift. Again, this is stuff that is, you don't think this isn't fucking written down and reported on. There's people whose job it is to fucking like figure out how to like get rid of these things, okay? But you know, this notion of selling out early in the hippie movement, right, which was like, you know, you're either, you know, we're revolutionary, again, this the revolutionaries versus the reformists, and also because the left is there's always those people that fucking pad themselves up and make themselves lots of money using all the cultural capital that comes from being a lefty without actually doing any of the hard stuff or the suffering or anything. That's, again, you know, the left get left behind a lot by fucking, you know, new left, professional left people. Okay. That's a common thread. So you can see how something like, you know, in the advertising industry, when it became cool to utilize hippies and social movements and all that sort of stuff, that there would be some resentment towards those musicians and, you know, those people that kind of sign record deals and, you know, all that sort of stuff. All of these things, Woodstock, you know, something is like, well, that's not what this was about. We were supposed to fucking, what, hang on, what? Where's the revolution? You all forgot about it. What? And you can see how that sort of, that simmering stuff happens all the time. The left, it's funny. I like it. It's funny. You just learn to laugh and go, yeah, all right, you're having that fucking argument again. Cool, we've had that a few times. Never resolves. And also, every time you have that argument, people get rich and fucking Republicans get elected and right-wingers get elected because they call us disorganized, give people the idea we can't organize a fucking economy and all that sort of horse shit. And that we're authoritarian because we've got grievances. We're telling people what the left is and should be, which is correct. And like, you know. But you can see psychologically how that as a psyop breaks apart the left. Don't even need to fucking try anymore. Talk about that on Monday. Oh, it's amazing. But you can see how over 100 years, this is just time and time again, that fucking same argument without fail gets the left voting for policies constantly that we don't consent to or agree with because we fucking hate that other guy because he sold out. Or we fucking dig our heels in over a single issue and get tunnel vision and accidentally help support something that you wouldn't ordinarily support. Now, I'm going to do another stream on this, which is the kind of propaganda that you're going to see coming up. It's like, do you support this? Because if you don't support this, you have to fucking stop making yourself useful over here and saying shit like leaving the left and disaffected left. Because what they're doing is creating this big fucking net. And it's like, no, this is why I spend so much time going, guys, they're not the fucking left. The left is here. They haven't gone anywhere. It's the same shit. Will you just fucking stop it? Every fucking time. Every fucking time it works. Because it's like, same argument. But it's just like, well, okay, well, maybe keep that to yourself then. Maybe don't start a fucking channel where you broadcast to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who don't know what the left is, who only vote based on single fucking issues, see someone they like saying, oh, those guys are fucked, I'm done. And you take them with you. And what you do is you defund universities, you fucking, get health, you never get fucking free healthcare. And also if you're in Australia, you get reduced coverage, which is what's happening here. Health benefits going up and up and up and up. You don't think we're not being inched towards a fucking American healthcare system and not the opposite way. We're not persuading them the other way. We're not winning. They are. Okay. Right. If Australia doesn't change course soon, that negative gearing campaign, the last election, and people saying that, all this fucking scaremongering, it worked because people didn't want to lose their fucking, the death tax thing. Remember that? It works because, again, optics, but also just what people, an understanding of why and how people vote and what their motivations are. Usually they go, well, Joe Rogan said that those guys are fucking lunatics and he talked to Jordan Peterson who said that they're authoritarian. I have internalized propaganda my whole fucking life about how fascism and communism are identical. I don't want either of those. So what I'm going to do is vote for the fucking centers. The people who are saying that they're on the center, who aren't. They're the ones who are actually just fucking making everything worse and creating, again, an understanding of history, creating the material conditions in which fascism actually fucking rises. Because the socialists can't get their shit together. The left can't get their shit together. You've got people who don't know what the fucking left is leaving the left. And the right going, cool, welcome. Welcome, useful fucking gay person, feminist, black person, trans person. We'll use you and we'll nudge your fucking audience in our direction. Meanwhile, neither of them give a fuck about the real issues, the material, the poverty. You think the Republicans are going to fucking support a minimum wage? You think the fucking Liberal Party, you think they're going to suddenly, not do what they've always done, which is have war on universities? Yeah, okay, well, let's just kill the whole fucking department in order to own the woke, shall we? Because I don't like that guy on Twitter. I think he's a bit creepy and a bit of a pedo. Personally, I think we should burn it to the ground because I don't like that fucking person on Twitter. What the fuck? That's not politics. But that's the impact. Okay. Fascism rises with instability, rage, chaos, okay, deadlock governments, economic fucking fallout, okay, pandemics. And socialists are falling for this. Well, the people who identify as socialists fall for this again, 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 and again. So either you can get your fucking class politics fucking right and straight and you get your politics straight, or do some fucking work and know that you're actually just a shill for fucking opposition. You controlled opposition. Okay. That's the term, controlled opposition. Anyway, I've talked too long. I'm running out of steam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably stream. I was going to make shorter streams every day next week because I've got a lot to talk about, and people tend to not stick around too long, right? And often I get to the substance of what I'm saying into the streams, but I kind of, I don't know. Anyway, whatever. I'm going to go. I love you. Please think about this. Learn what what does it mean to fucking leave the left? And also, with your announcement to leave the left, what's your motivation? Is it to get, what do you get out of announcing it in an election year? Okay. That means you're campaigning for fucking certain policies that you may or may not agree with. I think it through again. Past step 1. Okay. Past the first shit. Okay. You think this Charlotte Clymer is a fucking narcissist. Yeah. Okay. Is that worth burning everything to the fucking ground for? Some perverts exist. Is that worth burning the ground for? Burning everything down for? Because that's really the stakes. Because at the moment we're on the brink of fucking war. We've seen this woke shit used time and time and time and time again to distract and derail public opinion around this stuff. And, being used as a fucking disinformation, misinformation, fucking cancel that. Oh no, the M&Ms aren't sexy. The M&Ms are sexy. Fucking how dare you be offended by sexy M&Ms. Oh, all you want is to collapse Western civilization with fucking M&Ms. What the fuck? Meanwhile, the United States is the fucking Weimar Republic. They can't pass anything. I don't think people understand how they're not able to pass anything. They're fucking pretty much deadlocked. And if the furlough happens like it did with Obama and this stuff, the world's going to fucking, like, in the current climate, it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, people. So fucking tunnel vision and short-sighted. But I think really understand that, when you say you're on the left, what does that mean? Does it mean can I just say that if things go the way they're going, and they start fucking turning on people who are like thought to be socialists and Marxists and those people, okay, when the Republicans win or fascism rises, okay, or anything like that, and they start to fucking reinvigorate their little McCarthy trials, okay? Because remember, they're all woke authoritarians and they're all fucking Marxists, so anyone who sounds like a Marxist must be a fucking... See what's happening. The next step. Think through the next fucking steps. Which is just, when this stuff happens and rises, there's a point of no return for the left. Which is that there's going to be a whole bunch of corporate fucks, woke fucks who switch sides. They're not our friends. Okay? Look at what happened with the McCarthy trials and shit, and Reds under the beds and all that shit. How many fucking lefties just sold out their friends? Okay? I won't. If it gets to there, I'm fucking going down. I don't give a shit. I'm not relenting. That's what it means to be left-wing, is that you are fucking left-wing and you object to it. You don't fucking make yourself a nice little not-for-profit job gaslighting everybody who has any fucking sympathy for people's pain right now. Anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. I don't want non-violent revolution. I want the people who keep telling us to ask nicely to start asking a bit more fucking seriously on our behalf. Can you just fucking ask a bit harder, please? Thank you. People are fucking suffering. I'm going to be back on Monday. And I wrote a thing. I'm writing another thing on the weekend, I think. I love you. Thank you for your precious life second. Go to my website. Is that what I said? Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye. It's quiet this time of day. No one's around. All right. Bye.